What is up, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the 3&D here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Make sure you hit subscribe below and follow our socials at the 3&D ETB and at ETB Network. On tonight's episode, we got a jam-packed one for you as James Harden decided to report to camp. So we'll be going over that situation, what that means for the Sixers, and if he's actually going to play. The NBA Preseason also tipped off this past week, so we'll go over a little bit of that. Most teams haven't played yet, but Lakers and Warriors tipped off on Saturday, so we'll review that game. And then once again, another extension goes down as Payton Pritchard signed with an extension with the Celtics, and we'll finish up our season previews as we go over this Pacific Division and we go over the Southwest Division, the final two divisions that we haven't hit yet. So I hope everybody's doing well. The NBA season is inching closer and closer, and we're getting more and more news coming up on the front of James Harden and what he's going to do with the Sixers. But it's a little bit of some interesting news. In a couple weeks ago in the episode, we were going over what exactly the Sixers are going to do without James Harden to start the season. Well, James Harden decided to report to camp. So news came out that he reported to camp this week, which shakes things up big time because he's not going to play in their preseason opener, but he's just starting to wrap up things on the front of getting ready, and it seems like that he's going to be getting closer and closer to being ready to play for the Sixers. So he's decided to kind of swallow his pride a little bit and come back to the Sixers. Definitely his best decision. He'll end up getting paid. If he really still wants out of the Sixers, a good first half of the season, or at least a good start of the season, could definitely lead to him being traded a couple months into the year. And it will also help the Sixers out a lot because they can end up getting something decent for James Harden, which they, as of right now, nobody's going to give them. So it's good. I'm honestly glad, even though I'm a big Knicks fan, love seeing the Sixers fall apart and all that kind of stuff. I'm glad that James Harden reported to camp, and it looks like he's going to get ready to start the season with the 76ers. I'm more happy to see it as a basketball fan, too. It gets to a point where, like, all these guys throwing fits, wanting out, and starting seasons just being frustrated and refusing to play and stuff really just gets to be enough is enough. And James Harden has done this. It would have been twice in the past three seasons, and forced his way out of three teams. It would have been. He forced his way out of the Rockets, forced his way out of the Nets, and then it would have been the Sixers. But we'll wait and see. Again, he's only got 1 year left on his contract. He's got a 1 year, $36.5 million contract, and then he becomes an unrestricted free agent next offseason. So a big year, too, even if he stays in Philadelphia, could equal a huge payday next offseason for James Harden. And it'll help the Sixers out big time, too, because the Sixers with James Harden are a NBA title contender, without a doubt. Are they necessarily at the top and expected to go over the Bucks or the Celtics or any of those teams? I don't think so. But they are by far one of the top teams in the East if James Harden is playing. So it makes things a lot more interesting. Joel Embiid, too, I'm sure will be a lot happier now that he's got a star player next to him, and it's not just going to be him, Tyrese Maxey, and Tobias Harris to start off the season. So James Harden reports to camp. We'll have more news on that in the upcoming episodes as we're previewing the season, and we'll see, how he looks in his preseason debut, which is not going to be their next game, but possibly their second game of the preseason. Most preseasons start this upcoming week for most NBA teams. But with the exception of the Lakers and Warriors, who tipped off the preseason this past week. So we'll jump right into that. So the NBA preseason did tip off on Saturday. The Golden State Warriors took on the Los Angeles Lakers at the Chase Center. The Warriors ended up winning 125-108. Again, preseason scores really don't matter too much. Both LeBron and Draymond Green didn't play. Draymond's battling some injuries. LeBron is definitely not battling. There was really no say on why LeBron didn't play, at least that I saw. He's definitely not battling any injuries, but he's probably load managing at least for the beginning of the season, and entering his age 39 season. I don't think that he's going to be playing in very many preseason games. We're playing big minutes in any of these preseason games. So LeBron and Draymond both didn't play, but Anthony Davis did play. Anthony Davis started, played 13 minutes, had 15 points and 5 rebounds. The big minute getters for the Los Angeles Lakers were young guards Max Christie, who's going to be a sophomore. He played 25 minutes, scored 15 points. And rookie point guard Jalen Hood-Schifino played 23 minutes at 7.6 rebounds with a good game. He's a rookie out of Indiana, was a late first-round pick for the Los Angeles Lakers. Could be a key player to come off the bench. You got to remember that name, Jalen Hood-Schifino. He could end up developing into a key player as the season kind of goes on, and as the bench kind of thins with injuries and all that kind of stuff. So it'll make things interesting for sure. And then some of their depth guys all played a decent amount of minutes for the Lakers as well. Cam Reddish played some good minutes. Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, and Rui Hachimura all played pretty decent minutes. The normal guys, though, did not play very much. And then on the Warriors side, Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody were the big names for them. Jonathan Kuminga played 24 minutes, had 24 points and 8 rebounds. Moses Moody also played 24 minutes and had 15 points and 4 rebounds. And rookie guard Brandon Podziemski played 26 minutes. He had 11 points and 6 rebounds. So they played their young guys a lot. They're going to be expecting a lot out of Jonathan Kuminga this offseason. We'll be going over the Golden State Warriors in probably about a couple of minutes, because they're actually going to tip off the continuation of our season previews, as we're going to do the Pacific Division first. But we'll go over the Warriors a little bit more in depth in a few. But Jonathan Kuminga is definitely going to be getting some big minutes this season. They have a couple of guys on the way out, and they want him to develop into. I mean, they just re-signed. They just extended Draymond Green to another 4-year contract. So it almost looked like when they drafted Kuminga, he was going to be the successor to Draymond Green. Doesn't seem like that way anymore. But Kuminga, at the very least, if he can put together a good season as the 6th or 7th man, he could possibly hit free agency and kind of get a big contract and maybe a starting job somewhere else. He'd have to hit restricted free agency first, of course. But Kuminga definitely is entering a big year of his NBA career, entering his 3rd season. So that'll definitely make things interesting. And then Moses Moody as well hasn't really shown much throughout his NBA career so far. So he will hope to be one of their key shooters off the bench. And then as for the big name guys for the Warriors, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson both did play. Steph played only 13 minutes. He had 8 points, was 2 for 5 from 3, had 3 steals to go along with it. Klay Thompson also played 13 minutes and had 10 points and 4 rebounds, and shot 2 for 7 from 3. So, of course, as you see the preseason go along, you're going to see a lot of the young guys getting more minutes, and teams with open roster spots that they're trying out guys who are on training camp deals are going to get some big minutes to see which guys will end up making the team in a couple of weeks when the season actually starts. So the Lakers and Warriors did tip it off, though. Keep a lookout all this week, though, as more and more NBA preseason games are going to be getting underway, and it's almost here. The NBA regular season will be tipping off in just a couple of weeks. So definitely getting very excited for that. And, there's going to be more news coming out in the very, very near future. So some other news that broke this week, Payton Pritchard signed an extension. So Payton Pritchard, who last season was losing minutes for the Boston Celtics, and kind of went on the record to say that, he loves being in Boston, but he wants a bigger role. And if that's with somebody else, then so be it. Well, a lot of things changed this offseason to open the door for Payton Pritchard. And Marcus Smart was dealt away. Malcolm Brogdon was just recently dealt away. And now with Drew Holiday as the starting point guard, Payton Pritchard jumps into being one of the top guys off the bench and the backup point guard. And he's had some decent seasons. throughout his first few years in the NBA, and he just received a 3-year, $40 million extension with the Boston Celtics to be one of their key bench players for the next few years. So good get for him. Happy for him. He's been one of the grittier guys in the NBA over the past few seasons. Was a second-round pick, very good college player at Oregon, but wasn't a huge NBA prospect. He latched on and was able to make a name for himself, and now he ends up getting a second contract, which is a pretty big contract to be one of the Celtics' top bench players, a team that has NBA championship aspirations. So that's definitely some interesting stuff, and I think a good move by the Celtics too, because he got kind of clogged up last season. They had Marcus Smart, they had Malcolm Brogdon. They had a lot of guys clogging up all the minutes, a lot of veteran guys, and he kind of fell towards the end of the bench. And so now with the Boston Celtics kind of looking for ammunition and looking for, more things to, more guys to be able to play big minutes and clog up some of the holes, Pritchard's going to jump in and definitely do that for the Celtics. So will be interesting to see. So jumping over from that, those three were the top headlines of the weekend. And without any further ado, we're going to finish off our NBA season preview. So we got two divisions left. The first off is the Pacific Division, and we're going to lead things off with the Golden State Warriors. So the Pacific Division may arguably be the best division in the NBA. You got the Warriors, Clippers, Lakers, and Phoenix Suns and Sacramento Kings. That's 5 teams that all could be top 6 teams in the Western Conference that you could 100% see doing that. So I would say it's by far the most stacked in the entire, out of any division in the entire league. All 5 teams are at the very least a playoff team. So you would expect that all 5 of those teams would be 5 of the 8 that end up making it. But first things first, the Golden State Warriors. So Steve Kerr returns for his 10th year now with the Golden State Warriors. So time goes by fast. It's going to be his 10th season. Won 4 championships, obviously, and lost 2. The big move of the offseason for the Warriors, though, was Chris Paul coming in. So they were able to trade for Chris Paul. They jumped in on the Phoenix Suns trade with Bradley Beal and was able to snag Chris Paul away. A lot of people were wondering what exactly is going to happen with that lineup. You've got 3 legitimate guards, and are you going to start them all together? What exactly can you expect from this team? Well, according to the lineup in the first preseason game and what everything has been kind of tipping their hand towards, it seems like all 3 of them are going to start together. Chris Paul's going to run the point. Steph and Clay are going to play the wings, and Clay will probably be in the backcourt as well. And then Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green, that's probably their starting 5. So it's going to be a small starting 5. Andrew Wiggins is the tallest guy in the starting 5 at 6'7". Draymond's 6'6", and then you'll have Steph, Clay, and CP3. So it'll definitely be a small starting 5. Kevon Looney, they'll definitely have as one of the top backups and a guy that you can slot in at center if you need to go bigger, if you're playing against a bigger, more dominant big man. He definitely could be. But also off the bench, you'll have Jonathan Kuminga. You got Moses Moody. Gary Payton II, they traded for after he signed a 3-year deal with Portland after winning a championship with them a couple years ago. They were able to reacquire him during the season last year. So he'll be one of their top guys off the bench, their top defender off the bench. Dario Saric also comes in from Phoenix. Rudy Gay was let go by the Utah Jazz, and he's going to be headed to the Warriors too, and Corey Joseph. So they have a decent veteran-filled bench, which is definitely good. I mean, Andre Iguodala is now at the end of his career. He's no longer on the bench for the Golden State Warriors, so they load up with a few other guys. So the biggest additions was Chris Paul, Dario Saric, Rudy Gay, and Corey Joseph. Rodney McGruder they also brought in, who funny enough, if you guys remember during the COVID season in the 2021-22 season, that was the 2020-2021 season. That was the guy that Clay said that Klay Thompson got into a little bit of an argument with when he was in Detroit, and Clay said after the game that he's going to be out of the league in a year or so. So he's trying to stay relevant or whatever. So now he's going to be teammates with him. So Rodney Magruder is back on the Warriors. And then there are two rookies, too. Brandon Podziemski, who was a rookie out of Santa Clara, and Trace Jackson Davis, who was a star at Indiana. Power forward. He's not much of a three-point shooter. That was the reason why he kind of fell in the draft a little bit. He ended up being a second-round pick. Could have easily been a first-round pick. If you watched him play at Indiana, he was one of the best players in college basketball for a good 2 or 3 seasons. And the Warriors were able to land him. I think that was a pretty good move. He, at the very least, will be at the end of the bench and could give them good minutes right off the bat to a 23-year-old rookie. He could be a good rotational piece. So I think that there's some decent stuff to look forward to for the Warriors. But the Warriors are going to jump in a very interesting situation. I mean, they won the NBA Finals just a couple of years ago. For first time that they were able to even make it back after Kevin Durant had left. But they were able to win it a couple of years ago. The Nuggets won it last year, of course. And anytime the Warriors are fully healthy, they're going to be a threat to win the NBA Finals. You know, Steph and Clay really have not missed a beat. They're both entering their mid-30s now. CP3's in his late 30s. They got an old team. Andrew Wiggins is pushing 30. Draymond is over 30. They've got an old team, and they've been around for a long time. I mean, Steve Kerr is now entering his 10th season as the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, which is like crazy to think about. But they're always going to be a title contender. So it'll be interesting to see what we kind of get out of the Chris Paul, Steph, and Clay mix. I think that there, in some ways it could be good, in some ways it could be kind of interesting. You know, with Steph not running the points, Chris Paul is going to run the point mainly. You'll definitely see a high assist season for Chris Paul. Always has a high number of assists. I think he's averaged 7+ assists each season throughout his entire career. So you'll definitely see that again. The question is how many points a game he's going to be scoring. He hasn't been scoring much even when he was in Phoenix over the last couple of years, averaging like 11, 12 points a game or so. So it'll be interesting to see what he gets, if he even is able to average double-digit points because he's going to be the 4th, 5th option scoring and the main ball handler. So definitely be interesting. The Warriors are going to be kind of like almost a new look team in a way, which I kind of like. And jumping over from the Warriors, then we got the Los Angeles Clippers, another team in Pacific Division. So the Clippers, once again, you don't know what you're going to get from them. Tyronn Lue is now entering his 4th year with the Clippers after leaving the Cleveland Cavaliers, being fired from the Cleveland Cavaliers, actually, after winning the championship in 2016. He's done a great job with this team. A lot of people consider him the best head coach in the NBA right now. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but he has done a very good job with this Clippers team. This Clippers team has had a lot of talent throughout the last several years, but injury issues have absolutely killed them. And both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, it has been like ripping off a Band-Aid, basically, being able to try to get them to even step on the floor together. Since they both joined the Clippers back in 2019, they've barely played any games together. If one's not hurt, the other one's hurt. It's a crazy situation. And the NBA actually just released a couple of new rules for tanking. They're going to penalize like certain players for missing 2 straight games or something like that. I don't have the exact rule ahead of me, but then Kawhi Leonard responded and said, no rule that the NBA can mandate is going to make me play more games, which is a very arrogant comment, very interesting comment too. You don't really, I mean, Kawhi Leonard like barely talks, so you really don't know what he means by any of that. Is he trying to say like he's still going to sit out games and rest, or does he mean that the NBA mandating this is not going to stop him from getting injuries because he's come to accept the injuries? There's no doubt that he does get injured. He's got bad knee issues, all that kind of stuff, but the load management has been something that the Clippers need to kind of set straight. So going into the season, they re-signed Russell Westbrook. So their lineup will most likely be Westbrook, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Robert Covington, and Ivica Zubac. They practically bring back the same team they had last year. Off the bench, they got Marcus Morris back. They got Norman Powell, who could definitely end up being a starter for a while if George or Leonard are hurt. They got Bones Highland, Nicholas Batum, Terrence Mann, Mason Plumlee, Amir Coffey, and Brandon Boston Jr. All guys that were on their team last year. So they didn't really make many moves this offseason because they had most of their team still under contract. They ended up bringing guys back. They re-signed Russell Westbrook. They brought in KJ Martin from the Houston Rockets, and their one rookie is Kobe Brown from Missouri, who was a second-round pick. So the Clippers, since they're practically the exact same team, they're jumping into this season in a kind of interesting situation, and one that you really don't know how to predict them. It's almost impossible to predict them. I mean, I think I projected them a couple, like either once or twice to win the NBA Finals over the past like several years since Paul George and Kawhi both joined the team, and they haven't even made it close. They never make it close. They end up having good regular seasons or decent regular seasons and get knocked out early, and most of it's due to injuries or underperformance. So it's almost impossible to predict this team. It really is. You don't know what you're going to get until the season's over, because even if Kawhi and Paul George, play 10 plus straight games, you never know when they're going to go down. You never know when an injury is going to come up. You never know when they're going to load manage, all that kind of stuff, and it ends up killing the team. So hopefully, with both of them getting older, Paul George kind of getting into the latter part of his career, Kawhi Leonard is still kind of young, but is also in his 30s. They can try to put together a healthy season and compete, because the NBA world wants to see this team fully healthy. Like, there's no doubt about that. We want to see what this team can do if they're fully healthy. And with the whole load management stuff, you have no idea when that's going to happen. So the Clippers, they can be anything from a 1 seed in the Western Conference to a play-in team. We really have no idea. But that's where they're going to range, and that's probably where they're going to range as long as they keep this core together. And jumping over from the Clippers, we got the other Los Angeles team. We got the Los Angeles Lakers. So, of course, LeBron James entering his 21st season, I believe, in the NBA. He'll be turning 39 in December. And, yeah, absolute craziness, honestly. That we've gotten to this point of his career. And he's still at a pretty dominant pace. And as you all know, I'm one of the biggest LeBron critics, but the longevity is definitely a part of his game that you do have to give him kudos on, for sure. But the lineup going into the season: D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, LeBron James, Rui Hachimura, and Anthony Davis should be the starting five. Off the bench, you got Jared Vanderbilt, you got Gabe Vincent, who they brought in on a 3-year deal from the Miami Heat, Taurean Prince, Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, and then rookies Maxwell Lewis and Jalen Hood-Schifino, who we were actually just talking about in the preseason game before. Those are the young guys, but the Lakers had a bunch of free agents this offseason. They were able to re-sign them, though. D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and Jared Vanderbilt were all free agents. They were able to re-sign all 4 of them. I really thought they were only going to be able to afford to bring back 1 or 2 of them. They ended up bringing them back on not too expensive of deals either. I believe they gave D'Angelo Russell like 3 years, 50-ish, something like that. They gave Austin Reeves like 4 years, 70-ish. Hachimura got like 50 or 60 over 3 or 4 years, something like that. And Jared Vanderbilt got a pretty decent contract as well. So they were able to bring the guys that they acquired last season. I mean, they acquired a lot of these guys. Rui Hachimura, they traded for at the beginning of last season from the Wizards. They traded for D'Angelo Russell at the deadline for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Obviously, Russell started his career with the Lakers way before, actually during Kobe Bryant's final season in the NBA, way before LeBron was even a thought to go play for the Lakers. He was drafted for Kobe's final season. So he makes his way back to the Lakers. Hachimura was added too, and they added a lot of veterans to their bench too. Taurean Prince, Gabe Vincent, Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, and Cam Reddish were all signed to deals to help aid the bench. Christian Wood was an interesting guy who has had very, very good seasons over the last few years, but stayed on the market for a long time this offseason, ended up settling for a one-year deal with the Lakers to come off their bench. And there's no guarantee that he's even going to get big minutes. So very interesting. He was kind of one of the surprises of this offseason. He was at the top of the free agent class. If you made it on pretty much everybody's top 20 of the free agents going into the summer, Christian Wood was somewhere on their list, and he kind of just stayed on the market for a long time. And the Lakers ended up getting him on like a one-year cheap deal. So he'll end up coming off the bench for them. Gabe Vincent had that huge performance for the Miami Heat, becoming the starting point guard. He ended up getting rewarded with a 3-year deal to be one of their top guys off the bench, basically. D'Angelo Russell will probably be their starting point guard, but Gabe Vincent could be one of the top guys off the bench. And then their rookies, Maxwell Lewis, who's a wing from Pepperdine, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, who we were talking about, who's a big point guard from Indiana. So those two guys, I think Hood-Schifino could be one of those guys that ends up getting some decent minutes. He's a guard. Most of the veterans they have on their team are all forwards. He could end up moving up the charts pretty decently. He's a heads-up player. And he's only 19. He's a big point guard, though, too. He's like a 6'6" point guard. And does a little bit of everything. He's a good facilitator. I think that he could end up getting minutes. Maxwell Lewis, on the other hand, who was also drafted in the first round, probably will have to fight for his minutes, at least start off his NBA career. But he's looked at as more of a little bit of a project anyway, so he'll probably be towards the end of the bench. And, a lot of stuff has been surrounding the Lakers during the preseason. We had LeBron James coming out and saying that this was Anthony Davis's team. Anytime you got LeBron James on a team, they're going to be asking him questions. He's going to be making some comments, some called for, some uncalled for. As far as the expectations for this Lakers team goes, I don't have very high expectations for them. I mean, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, both at this point of their careers, are barely able to stay healthy. Anthony Davis is still young, but LeBron had never had injury issues throughout his career, but over the last few years has not been able to play full seasons. So you'll definitely see some load management from him. You'll definitely see some injury stints from LeBron as well. And the question is, will the other guys be able to hold down the fort while he's gone? Is D'Angelo Russell the right move? Is Austin Reeves the right move? Is Rui Hachimura the right move? We'll end up seeing that. I don't think that they're in the real talk of the Western Conference, but the Lakers will definitely always be in the mix with LeBron and Anthony Davis together. Mm-hmm. But jumping from them to a team that is definitely in the mix to win the NBA Finals this year, we got the Phoenix Suns. So the Phoenix Suns were by far the most active team this offseason. They have them and the Wizards are probably the two teams that have the most drastically changed teams from last season. Even down to the head coach. Phoenix, Frank Vogel will be entering the first year of his stint with the Phoenix Suns. After the Suns went out last year, they shockingly fired Monty Williams, who is now with the Detroit Pistons. But they hired Frank Vogel, and Vogel has been around the league for a lot of years now. This is his fourth team coaching. He won the 2020 bubble championship with the Los Angeles Lakers. He was also with the Indiana Pacers for a long time in the Orlando Magic. So he's now taken over as the Phoenix Suns head coach. And then with their new shaken up lineup, their lineup looks like Bradley Beal and Devin Booker is going to be the backcourt. Be interesting to see who runs point. It's probably going to be Bradley Beal. They're going to be trying to. It looks like they're going to be trying to turn him into a point guard. At least be able to handle the ball a little bit. Devin Booker will probably be able to handle the ball as well and run the point. And then their front court is probably going to be Josh Okogie, Kevin Durant, and Jusuf Nurkic, who they actually just recently acquired in the Damian Lillard trade, where they sent DeAndre Ayton to Portland. They were able to get Jusuf Nurkic. And their bench is completely different. So Grayson Allen is going to be their top guy off the bench. You got Eric Gordon, you got Nazir Little, and then a bunch of guys that they signed to one-year deals this offseason. Yuta Watanabe, who is a knockdown three-point shooter. Damian Lee, who they were able to re-sign. Keita Bates-Diop, and Drew Eubanks, who has been able to put up some good minutes for the Portland Trailblazers and the Utah Jazz over the last several years. So this offseason, they signed Drew Eubanks, Eric Gordon, Damian Lee, Chimezi Metu, Bol, and Keita Bates-Diop. They signed those 6 guys to all be bench players, all to one-year deals to kind of to fill out their bench and give themselves a pretty good core coming off the bench so they have some depth. And that's the one thing that I've said on the show plenty of times, and I'll say again going into the season, that I applaud the Suns on doing is a lot of times when these teams load up with a big names in their starting lineup, they have no bench. And I think that that's honestly what the Celtics have turned into. They traded everything they had on their bench. They lost Grant Williams, and they traded pretty much everything they have on their bench for a big 3 of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Drew Holiday. Now, if 1 or 2 of those guys go down, they're in big trouble because their bench really isn't deep enough to have guys step in and be able to carry the load while those other guys are out. The Phoenix Suns are different, though. The Suns made it known that they wanted to fill out their bench with one-year deals, as a lot of these stacked teams do, and they loaded up with some good young guys, not even just veterans who can who are kind of past their prime, like the Jeff Greens and the Rudy Gays of the world that get like one-year deals and kind of just fill in gaps basically throughout their NBA careers. Well, not their NBA careers, because at one point they were good starters, but throughout the back end of their NBA careers, they loaded up their bench with good young players. Yuta Watanabe was a knockdown three-point shooter last year. Drew Eubanks has been one of the better young big men in the NBA, getting some big minutes for the Portland Trailblazers as they were tanking last year. Eric Gordon is knockdown three-point shooter, getting older. They've had Damian Lee, and he's done some good stuff for them off the bench, so they decided to keep him. And they also added Grayson Allen, who was starting for the Milwaukee Bucks all of last season, a team who had NBA championship hopes. So, and Nasir Little, too, who has been one of the better bench players in the NBA over the past several years. So they loaded up with a bunch of good players. So if some of these guys go down, I honestly, Kevin Durant is not going to give you 82 games anymore. And you probably don't, and you don't need him to. But if Durant goes down, you've got Grayson Allen, and you've got Eric Gordon, Drew Eubanks if you need a big man. You got those guys who can step in and do a decent job of filling the hole for the time being. So I give the Suns a lot of credit in that regard for being able to have a overall pretty good 15-man squad. But looking at their team in a nutshell, those are all the guys they added. All the guys they lost. They lost Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Torrey Craig, Cameron Payne, Landry Shamet, Terrence Ross, TJ Warren, Jock Landale, Bismack Biyombo, and Darius Bazley. They lost 10 players, which is an absurd amount of players to lose in one off season for an NBA team. Like it's absolutely insane. So this is a completely new team. So you can't even take what the Suns have been. The Suns made it to the NBA Finals back in 2021. You can't even take what they've been over the last several years and compare it to what they could be this year, because it's a completely new team. Devin Booker is pretty much the only is the only real remaining face. Kevin Durant was added midseason last year, so you can't even really count him, even though he is technically returning. Devin Booker is the player that they've always wanted to build around, and they've been building around him since 2015. And he's the one guy that's been consistent through everything for the Suns. So this is a completely new team. It's going to take some time for the chemistry to build. That's why I don't think they're going to be like a 1 or a 2 seed in the Western Conference. But once things start clicking, and if they're staying healthy, if they're able to get Durant off the floor and healed up for a period of time, this is definitely a scary team. And then rounding off the Pacific Division, we have one of the biggest surprises of last season, the Sacramento Kings. So in the first year of the Mike Brown era, the Sacramento Kings completely overly performed last year, ended up making a run in the playoffs. They got knocked out by the Golden State Warriors, were not nearly as good as them. but both De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis were all-stars. Sabonis had been an all-star in the past. De'Aaron Fox was able to make his first all-star appearance. So their starting lineup will look the same as the overall team basically looks the exact same as they did last year. De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter is going to be the backcourt. Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis is going to be the front court. And then off the bench, they got Malik Monk. They got Davion Mitchell. They added JaVale McGee from the Dallas Mavericks. They were able to re-sign Trey Lyles, and they also added Chris Duarte from the Indiana Pacers. So they practically come into the season with the same team that they had last year, that they were able to finish well above 500. They were able to light the beam all they wanted as their fan, the famous thing that they do in Sacramento, lighting the beam before every game. That Sacramento fan base has been through a lot. They've been through a lot of losers over the past 20 years since the Mike Bibby, Chris Webber, Doug Christie era. They have not had a consistently good team. Even during the DeMarcus Cousins era, they did not have a consistently good team. So they had a great season last year, and they're hungry to get back on that track. And Mike Brown did a tremendous job in his first head coaching job since he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers early in LeBron's career. He's been an assistant for a long time. He was assistant under Steve Kerr for a while with the Golden State Warriors. And he's finally back to being a head coach now, and he did a fantastic job with the Kings last year. And the question is, with the Western Conference kind of beefing up a little bit, especially with the Suns and the Lakers and the Clippers and the Warriors and stuff, they're in a very, very tough division. Are they going to be able to keep it up this year? So that's going to be the big question. It's going to be very tough to get a top 6 seed in the Western Conference. And not have to play in the play-in tournament. They're definitely good enough to be able to do that, but the biggest question, I think, going into the year is if they will be able to. So jumping over to the Southwest Division now, the final division out of everybody, we got the Dallas Mavericks. So the biggest thing the Dallas Mavericks did this offseason was re-signing Kyrie Irving. It was a little bit of a surprise. He was an unrestricted free agent. No one really knew what he was going to do. The Mavericks traded for Kyrie at the deadline last year from the Brooklyn Nets, and he wasn't really able to help them. They finished under 500. They missed the play-in tournament. They had a really, really bad year last year. Luka Doncic had a tremendous year, but pretty much the rest of the team did not have a good year. So Jason Kidd's going to be entering his 3rd year as the Dallas Mavericks head coach. Their starting lineup, Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, and Dwight Powell is going to be their starting 5. And then coming off the bench, they signed Grant Williams to a 3-year deal, so they were able to pry him away from the Boston Celtics. He'll probably be their 6th man. They were also able to bring in Derrick Jones Jr., Richaun Holmes, and Seth Curry, all veterans that they were able to bring in. And they got some young guys too. Jaden Hardy and Josh Green are 2 young guys who were top prospects coming out of high school that were finally starting to get minutes down the stretch last year for Dallas and are starting to turn into some decent role players. And then they had a lottery pick this year. They took Derek Lively the 2nd with it. Lively was the number 1 overall recruit heading into last year's freshman class in ESPN. He had a really, really bad first half of the season for Duke. Was able to kind of turn things around as a good rim protector. He's a good shot blocker, good back to the basket scorer, and they were able to get him in the late lottery. So they're hoping that he'll develop into their starting center, whether it's this year or if it's in the future, because their 4 and 5 are wide open. Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell are most likely going to be their starting 4 and 5. They don't really have too many big men. So the door is wide open for Grant Williams, Richaun Holmes, Derek Lively, and all of them to possibly be getting starting jobs. So Derek Lively could very well become the starting center at some point during this season. And then their biggest loss is, though, Christian Wood. They ended up losing. They also lost JaVale McGee and Davis Bertans. That's why losing those 3 guys is part of the reason why they have such a big hole in their power forward and center positions. And they also lost Reggie Bullock. And then their rookies, Derek Lively, the 2nd leg we're just talking about, and Olivier Maxis Prosper, who they also took in the 1st round. He's a wing out of Marquette, who kind of rose up the ranks very quickly. So the Dallas Mavericks, it's very difficult for me to see them be much better than they were last year. They had a very, very down year last year. And they didn't get much better. They didn't really do a whole lot. I mean, they added Grant Williams and they added Derek Lively. That was about it. They've got a lot of holes on this team. I mean, a big two of Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic is very explosive if both of them are healthy and playing together. And if Kyrie's head screwed on straight, then they could be a good big two. But besides the two of them, they don't have a ton of depth. And I'm not a huge fan of the rest of their lineup. And I think the Western Conference overall is just a tough division. Or it's just a tough overall conference. So seeing them being much better than a playing team, I really just don't see it. I don't think they're going to be too much better than they were last year. And jumping over to the next team, we got the Houston Rockets. So the Houston Rockets, in a very weird situation. The Rockets were deep in a rebuild over the last couple of years, acquired some top draft picks, brought in Jalen Green, brought in Jabari Smith. But this offseason, they ended up bringing in Ime Udoka, who had a tremendous year with the Boston Celtics, where he was able to bring them to the NBA Finals. And then obviously he had the scandal going into last season and was let go and was out of the league last year. He's now taken over the Houston Rockets. And they were able to bring in two very good veterans. Fred VanVleet, who's an all-star. They signed to a 3-year, $130 million contract. Absolutely absurd contract, but for Fred VanVleet. But they do have their star player now. And they also brought in Dylan Brooks to a $20 million deal. And on top of that, they've got Jalen Green, who became a 20-point-per-game scorer last season. They brought in Amen Thompson, who was their top draft pick this year. And then they had Jabari Smith, who was, I believe, the third or fourth overall pick a couple of years ago. So they've got the young talent mixed with a few veterans. And their projected lineup, Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green should be the backcourt. And then they'll have Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Şengün will be their front court. Şengün has turned into a very solid big man, too, in the NBA. Then coming off the bench, they got Amen Thompson, who was their top 5 pick this past year. Jae'Sean Tate, who has seen a lot of time in the starting lineup at forward. Jock Landale, who they gave actually big money to, who came off the bench for the Suns last year. Tari Eason, they signed Jeff Green away from the Denver Nuggets, and Cam Whitmore, too, who they were able to draft with the 20th pick, who should have been a lottery pick, but ended up falling a little bit due to injury concerns. And this is all not counting Kevin Porter Jr., who would have been probably their sixth man this year. He's under a lot of scrutiny. He's been a head case throughout his entire NBA career, and he's in a domestic violence case right now, and the Rockets have him away from the team and are trying to work out a trade for him. I'm not sure if that actually gets done, but as of right now, it doesn't seem like he's going to be joining the team anytime soon. So he's kind of out of the projected lineup for right now. So it makes things interesting. This Rockets team, I don't think is really that competitive. They'll have VanVleet, who will put up very good numbers, along with Jalen Green, who's going to try to keep developing and become an all-star caliber player. Jabari Smith has had a good year this past year, but they'll see what they can kind of get out of him. And then they got a few veterans though too. I mean, Jeff Green, they got Dylan Brooks. It'll be interesting to see if they fall out of contention quickly. If one of those guys gets traded, if they're playing very well, that could definitely happen. So they can give the young guys more talent. But the Rockets are still definitely deep into a rebuild, and I don't think that they're a playoff team going into this season. And then we have the Memphis Grizzlies. So the Memphis Grizzlies are in a very, very weird position. Taylor Jenkins is entering his 5th year, but heading into the season, John Morant will be suspended for the first 20 games of the season because of everything that's been going on off the court, as we know, taking pictures with guns, all that kind of stuff. He did it again this offseason, so he was suspended by the NBA. So he will be out to start the season for the first several games. And it just came out that Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to have surgery, and he might miss 2 to 3 months. So we may not see him until December. So the reigning NBA Defensive Player of the Year and their all-star star player both being out for possibly the first 2 or 3 months of the season, which is a huge blow for the Grizzlies. a big enough blow right there that could almost take them out of contention, where they may end up being a play-in team because of it and not being able to get a top 6 seed. With those two out of the lineup, their projected lineup going this season, they have Marcus Smart, who they obviously traded for. That was one of the big deals. Him and Desmond Bain, who they just extended, should be the backcourt. Zaire Williams, Brandon Clark, and Steven Adams will most likely be the front court. And then coming off the bench, they got Luke Kennard. They just signed Derrick Rose, Xavier Tillman, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, John Conchar, and Santi Aldama, who are all draft picks of theirs that have become very, very solid role players with the good teams that they've been able to put together. And then they have Gregory Jackson Jr. as well, who they drafted with their first round pick this past year. So they definitely have a lot of depth in the front court. The question is their backcourt. Without John Morant, Smart and Bain will be the starters. And then they got Luke Kennard and Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose will definitely get some minutes to start the season. He was struggling to find any minutes the last couple of years with the New York Knicks, and he hit free agency this offseason and signed a cheap deal with the Grizzlies. But honestly, with Morant out, he should be able to see minutes right off the bat. They're going to probably rely on him to be – he's most likely going to be the backup point guard to start the season. Marcus Smart will be their starter. Derrick Rose will probably be their backup until John Morant comes back. And then they have Luke Kennard and they have John Conchar too, who's also a shooting guard. So their backcourt is going to be interesting. They've got a lot of depth in the front court. Zaire Williams is going to be a third-year player. Now he was starting to get big minutes off the bench this past year, so he could very well end up starting in the place of Jaren Jackson Jr., as well as Brandon Clark. Kyle Anderson also left in free agency to go sign with the Minnesota Timberwolves, so they're going to be filling that hole as well. He was their starting small forward for a while, so Zaire Williams could step into that role. And so it'll be interesting to see what we get out of the Grizzlies to start the season. I'm not expecting anything too much, to be honest with you. I think that, like I said before, the suspension to John Morant and the injury to Jaren Jackson Jr. could be enough that it takes them out of contention, that a big second half might only put them into the play-in tournament. So the Grizzlies could struggle to have a good season this year. And then we have the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that I thought was going to take the next step last year and completely didn't. We had the whole craziness with Zion Williamson this offseason, with IG models and all that kind of stuff. But Willie Green will enter his third year as the head coach of the Pelicans. Their lineup will be CJ McCollum. They're going to have a big lineup, most likely heading into the season. CJ McCollum is probably going to take over at point guard. Brandon Ingram is looking at most likely being the 2, Zion Williamson at the 3, Herbert Jones at the 4, and Jonas Valanciunas at the 5. So they have a very weird lineup with very strange sizes. You got Brandon Ingram at the 2, who's almost 6'10", and then you'll have Zion Williamson probably at the 3 or the 4, who's 6'5", but like 260 pounds, 270 pounds. And then Herbert Jones, who's 6'8", who is a lengthy guy, great defender, who they just re-signed this offseason. And then coming off the bench, they have Dyson Daniels, they have Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, Larry Nance Jr., Trey Murphy, and Jordan Hawkins, who they used with their first-round pick, the leading scorer for the UConn Huskies for their championship team this past year. He might end up getting some good minutes for the Pelicans because they don't have really many true guards on this team. If that's their starting lineup, the only true guard they have in that starting lineup is CJ McCollum, and then off the bench, Dyson Daniels and Jose Alvarado are their only true guards as well. Najee Marshall's more of a forward, Larry Nance is a forward, and Trey Murphy is more of a forward as well. So Jordan Hawkins could definitely see some time if he comes out of the gates doing pretty well. But the Pelicans didn't do amazing last year. Zion ended up getting hurt again for a while. He was not able to stay healthy. And if he goes down, this team's in big trouble. They have some potential to make some noise in the Western Conference, but realistically, they're probably only a play-in team. They didn't really add much to their roster either after having a down year last year. And also Brandon Ingram's contract is coming to a close pretty soon, and he's not really willing to sign an extension just yet. So it'll be interesting to see what the Pelicans end up doing. And then rounding it off for the final team, the 30th team of our NBA season previews, we have the San Antonio Spurs. So the San Antonio Spurs, one of the talks of the offseason for two reasons. First things first, Greg Popovich is entering his 28th year as the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, the greatest head coach in NBA history, in my opinion. He signed a 6-year extension heading into this season. He's well into his 70s now, and it looked like after the whole Duncan, Parker, Ginobili squad kind of, and Kawhi Leonard demanded his trade, it looked like Greg Popovich was going to be on his way out. He stuck around the last few seasons. They've had terrible teams the last few years. He stuck around because he was getting paid well. And now they have Victor Wembanyama. They were able to land the number 1 overall pick from this past NBA draft. And obviously it was Victor Wembanyama, who is the biggest prospect in the NBA since LeBron James back in 2003. He is a 7'4" unicorn who can shoot, handle the ball, great blocker, great stealer, can play any position 1 through 5 pretty much. They think that he can be a ball handler at 7'4". He moves like a 6'5" guy. It's honestly pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing, like the amount of stuff that he can do, and this is why he's such a huge prospect as well. And he's headed to the Spurs, and that's what's kept Greg Popovich around. So Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, who they also just extended, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. Looks like it's going to be the starting 5. Coming off the bench would be Doug McDermott, Zach Collins, Malachi Branham, Devontae Graham, Chetty Osman, who they picked up from the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Sidi Sissoko, who was their other first-round pick. So Wembanyama and Sissoko were their main first-round picks. So this team is not going to be a playoff team. They're still probably going to have a bad year, but all eyes are going to be on Victor Wembanyama. They'll get some primetime games. They'll get a lot of spots on ESPN because of Wembanyama. Everybody's going to be looking at him and seeing how he performs his rookie season. Is he worth the hype? Will he actually be that generational talent that everybody thinks he's going to be? Everybody's going to be looking at him, and there's going to be a lot of overreactions too. Get yourself ready for that. That's how I'm going to end off these season previews right now. Get yourself ready for the overreactions on Victor Wembanyama. If he has a bad game, if he has a bad first 10 games in the NBA, you're going to hear how he's going to be a bust, all that kind of stuff. If he isn't averaging 20 and 10 at the end of the season, you're going to be hearing how he's going to be a bust, and he's only 19 years old. So there's going to be a lot of overreactions. There's going to be no Wembanyama overreactions on here unless they're well deserved. Unless he's averaging like 5 and 2 or something like that for like the majority of the season, then we might start ripping into him a little bit. But no overreactions on this part. ESPN is going to take care of all the overreactions of Victor Wembanyama. So this Spurs team is not a contender. They're not going to be a playoff team. They're probably going to end up being one of the top lottery picks again this year, which actually would be best case scenario in my opinion, because they're going to need to add some guys around Victor Wembanyama because they really don't have much. They have Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, which is the furthest thing from a big 3 right there. So that's going to do it for another episode of the 3&D. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Empty the Bench Podcast Network for another episode. Once again, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and follow the social media at the 3&D ETB. We'll be putting out content all week in case you missed the entire episode as well. And hope everyone has a great night. Watch some more preseason basketball. Check back on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network YouTube channel to check out all of my other season previews. I've previewed all 30 NBA teams now. I've had some guests along the way as well, so go check those out. And we'll be putting out more and more information throughout the week. And hope everyone has a great night. Make sure to like and subscribe to Empty the Bench on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And make sure you follow the 3&D on Facebook, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and follow us on Instagram. Hope everybody has a good night, and we'll see you next week.